In this video, I will be providing you with some tips to help make one-to-one reading with your child a whole lot easier. These are things that I learned when I used to be a reading recovery teacher a few years ago, and they're just very, very simple prompts and techniques that you can use at home that will make a really big difference very, very quickly. There's also a crib sheet that goes along with this that it would be useful for you to have next to you the first few times that you do reading sessions, just so that you're remembering the key points from this video. So what are you trying to achieve when you're reading with your children? Firstly is independence. It's really, really important that eventually your child is confident and able enough to read correctly by themselves. The second one is self-correction. This is where you want your child to notice mistakes for themselves and fix them wherever possible without constantly relying on you as the adult to point the errors out or to help them to fix them. If they can just learn to notice that there's been an error and correct that themselves, they will make progress a lot faster. And finally, fluency. You want the reading speed to improve, and you actually want it to sound like a story if it's a story that they're reading, or sound like talking if it's information. So not too slow, using the punctuation, developing expression so that the reading flows. But then when you're reading with children, there's some really, really key things that you should try never to do. And most of you will be doing these things, and I know that staff in school also do these things, and so you have to train yourself not to do them, and not doing these things will definitely make for faster progress. So the number one thing not to do when you're reading with a child is don't use your finger or a pen to track the words for the child. It's really keeping your hands off the book completely. So don't hold the book for the child whilst they're reading, don't turn the pages, don't point to words when they're reading, don't point out errors for them. Just try to keep your hands completely off the book. In fact, it's really useful just to think about your whole body language and just trying to keep a little bit more distance between you and the child and the book, almost so that you're giving them the ownership of the reading and you're there in just an advisory capacity. The second thing is don't be too quick to point out errors once the child has read a word wrong. Usually it's good practice to let them get to the end of the sentence or the end of the paragraph, just so that you're giving them opportunities to spot errors for themselves. Jumping on errors too quickly all of the time is going to make the child reliant on you to know when they've made a mistake, and what you're trying to build is that ability to know for themselves when they've made a mistake. Often you'll find that children look at you, they know that there's been an error, and they'll instantly look at you for confirmation, rather than going back to the text and looking at the cues in the text, the specific words or sounds that would help them to fix that error. So if children are doing a lot of looking at you for confirmation when you're reading, just try to think about giving them the space to work out what the error might have been, and giving them a bit of physical space as well, maybe even turning your head away from time to time, just so that they know that it's their job to fix the error and not yours. And again, when errors have been made, it's about letting the child find that error. It's fine to tell them that there's been a mistake somewhere in the reading, but don't actually point to the word, here, you got this word wrong, this word here, have a look at this word. We're training the child to find their own mistakes and attempt to fix them. So this slide is really, really important. And at the beginning, when you're going back for your next session of reading, really try to focus just on maybe one of these things, particularly number one. So try to do a whole session without touching the book at all. It is harder than you think at first, but it does build up very, very quickly. So if you're not allowed to touch the book, how are you going to actually make a difference? And this is the key point to reading with children. All of your prompts are going to be verbal. They're going to be the most useful cue that you have to tune the child into the fact that there's been a mistake and they've got to try to fix it. So instead of pointing at words that are wrong, we're going to be using verbal cues, And this works even with the very youngest children. So your most useful prompt whenever there's been a mistake is going to be, try that again. The children will get fed up with you saying this, but they will try that again. And what try that again does is it tells the child that there's been an error somewhere, but it doesn't tell them where that error is. Okay, now this is best used once the child has got to the end of a sentence, maybe the end of a page if it's not a particularly long page, and there's been an error, or maybe two, somewhere on that page. And all you're going to say is, try that again. And what you're doing is prompting the child to go back to the beginning of that sentence, the beginning of that paragraph, the beginning of that page, whatever that looks like, and reread that. And when they go back to reread that, in their head they're thinking, okay, they've asked me to reread this again because I've made an error. So they will read it again with a little bit more concentration and a little bit more focus because they're looking for that error. Now they might read the same word wrong again in that rereading. So if you get to that point, your next good verbal prompt is, which bit was tricky? Show me the tricky bit. Which word was hard in there? And you might think, well, this is a silly prompt because if they knew which word was tricky, they wouldn't have read it wrong. They would have stopped and thought. But you would be really surprised how many children will just merrily read incorrectly, but then go straight to the error when you prompt them. So if you try this, I think you'll be really surprised at just how reliable children are at knowing exactly where the reading went wrong. So hopefully what will happen is they will point straight to the word and you can say, yeah, brilliant, okay, let's look at this word. And then this is where you can help them verbally, prompting them to look at the sounds, to look at the beginning of the word, look at the first sound, or maybe look at the end of the word, look right at the very end. What's that sound in the middle? Make all of the sounds and push them together to work out the word. So once you've identified that tricky bit, you can work together to actually work out what that word said. But again, you're not pointing at that word, you're asking the child to do it. Now, it might be that the child can't find the tricky bit, they don't know which word was wrong. And if you get to that point, try that again isn't really going to help because they're just going to read the same word incorrectly. So you could say, you point to the words, I'm going to say what you said. So they're going to track the words with their finger and you'll say, you said, and then say exactly what they said. And because they're not having to do the reading, hopefully what they will do is when their finger gets to the word that was incorrect, they'll be looking more at the visual clues in that word. They'll hear what you said. Ah, there we go. We've now found that tricky bit. This was the word that was wrong. And then you can go back and start to sound those words out, or look at the beginning, look at the end, look at this sound in the middle to work out what the word is. Another useful prompt that you can use if they've got to the end of the sentence, you might not have said where's the tricky bit. You might not go for try that again. You might just say, did that look right? Or maybe, did that sound right? Or did that make sense? Depending on what kind of error they've made. Because sometimes if they substitute home and house, for example, that might make sense. Okay, it also kind of looks right at the start. It's got a very similar meaning, but it's not entirely accurate. So I would pick that up and just say, did that look right? Look at the end of that word and see if you can get that way. And really, those prompts are pretty much all that you're going to need to really move this reading along. And if there has been an error, you're going to fix it. I would always get the child to go back and reread that section, maybe that sentence, maybe that paragraph, maybe that page, depending on how many words there are, so that you're reinforcing the correct version. Now, of course, there are going to be times when there's a word on that page that children just are not going to get because it's a technical word or because it is just very, very difficult. So you need to kind of learn when to make that call and when you're just going to tell them that word. Telling children words is okay, but it is a last resort. So I would only really do that if you look at it and think, okay, they're never going to get that. I'll let them have a little go at sounding it out, but then just for the sake of preserving the flow of the reading, I'm going to tell them what that word says. That is okay, but again, I would go back to the beginning of that section, that sentence, that page, and just get them to read that again. Now they know what that tricky word is, just to reinforce the fluency. I've taken a short video with permission of a child reading, and I thought it would be quite interesting for you to just listen to the kind of errors that he's making and the kind of prompts that I'm coming in with. It lags a little bit, but I'm hoping that it's enough to just give you the gist of how to use these prompts. So with the writing on the side, the black writing is the words in the book. The red writing is what he's actually saying. P is where I've prompted him to go back and try that again, and self-correction is where he's noticed, without me saying anything, that there's been an error and fixed that on his own. The green words are some of the prompts that I've used and my thoughts about his reading. So I'm not going to talk over the video, just have a good listen and see what you think.
What's the book called, first of all? Okay, and do you think that this is a storybook or an information book?
Information.
Yeah, because it really happened, didn't it? Okay, you might need a big voice as well. Just saying. See how you get on.
It's only the morning.
Okay, so I want you to go back and try that again.
It's 1 in the morning. A fire raced up the upwards of a bakery on Pudding Lane.
Okay, show me a word that was tricky. Yeah, so you had a really good start at the beginning bit. Look at the end of that word. What do you think it is?
Race.
No, look at the very end of the word.
Races.
Perfect. Now, can you read that sentence again?
It's 1 in the morning. A fire races up the walls of a bakery on Pudding Lane.
Perfect.
The baker and his family know they must take action. They each wish.
Try that again. Now you had the first sound perfect. Look at the next sound.
Wrenched.
Now look at the end.
Wrench opened the window and escaped over the rooftops.
Good. So how did they get out? Go back a sec. Turn back. How did they get out?
Reach the window open and climb over the rooftop.
Yeah. And what's that word that shows you how they opened the window? What did they do to the window? You read that the second time. Can you sound it out again for me?
Wrench.
Look at the end. Wrench. That's when you grab something and pull it really hard. Good stuff. Can we do one more page? Turn over.
So I hope you could see there that just a few simple prompts in the right place really made a difference to that reading right from the start. When he said it's only the morning, just a simple try that again, nothing else was needed, was enough for him to go back and read it's 1 in the morning with no further support. We did have to work quite hard on the ends of some words. Races, he said raced. Wrench, he said reach, wrenched, wrench. And you'll notice that I did spend a little bit of time at the end just going back and talking about that word, getting him to read it again just to reinforce, because he said wrenched again, reinforce that it was definitely wrench, and just explaining what that meant and putting it into context. So that was quite a lot of time just spent reading a couple of sentences, but hopefully when he then went home that evening and read that with mum or dad, that would have made much more sense and he would have been much more successful. So overall, I hope you found the video useful. I would say that I know as parents you probably feel a lot of pressure to read a lot in one go, read a whole book, or we need to read so many pages in one go, but please don't feel like that, because actually quality is much preferable to quantity. It's much more valuable to spend 15 minutes, 20 minutes maybe just reading a couple of pages really accurately using those prompts than spending the same amount of time to try to plough through a whole book. You'll feel worn out after it probably, but you know, you'll have done so much more in-depth reading strategy that it will really make a big difference. So always prioritise the quality over the quantity. And repetition is good. So if your child has a favourite book or they've really enjoyed reading a book and they want to read it again, that's absolutely fine, because what that will do is just build up that word recognition, that pattern recognition, maybe if there's rhyming words in there, how the story works, and they'll just find it so much more valuable than always just going on to the next book. So if you do want to ask me any questions, my name's Mrs. Speck. You can pop in, you can ask to see me. I'm full of good ideas for reading, for both improving reading and enjoyment of reading. I'm always happy to talk about it. So I hope you enjoyed the video, and thanks for watching.